Everyone says, even we write a Creta fighter, the Creta rival, the Creta segment.
Absolutely.
I mean, the Creta in a way defines it. And when you think of midsize SUV, you think of the Creta.
Since the launch in 2015, over 1 million Cretas have been sold, Hormazd. And over the last 3 years, we've been seeing the best ever year for the brand.
When competition comes, somehow the Creta doesn't get affected, isn't it? I mean,
It's just phenomenal.
look at the runaway success of the Rocks, but Creta not affected.
When Creta was launched, the mid-size market was somewhere around 2.5 to 3 lakh units. This year, it is likely to end at around 7 lakh. The category has more than doubled. One can say that Creta has played a big role in mainstreaming the SUV, so to say.
Clearly the most important model for Hyundai. In fact, there's a bit of a joke that it's not just Hyundai Motor India, it's Creta Motor India, because this model is so critical to Hyundai. Hello and welcome back to Deep Drive, our weekly podcast powered by Kotak Mahindra Prime. I'm Hormazd Sorabjee.
I'm Ketan Thakkar.
Well, this week we're going to be talking about the mid-size SUV segment and in particular the Hyundai Creta, which has emerged not only as the best-selling SUV last month, that's November 2024, but the second best-selling model or car in the entire market. So it's beaten hatchbacks. I think only the Baleno beat the Creta. So, Ketan, why don't you just give us some of the numbers?
Now, phenomenal how the brand has evolved from strength to strength. Since the launch in 2015, over 1 million Cretas have been sold, Hormazd. And over the last 3 years, we've been seeing the best ever year for the brand. This year, till November, they've sold about 174,000 units. Add another 15 to 18,000 units, we're talking about 190,000 SUVs.
Almost 2 lakh, yeah.
Almost 2 lakh.
One model, that's amazing.
I mean, the magnitude of the model, it contributes about 30,000 crore in revenues, almost 45% of Hyundai's SUV sales, 30% of its total sales, almost 50% of its profits, and it's also about 33% of the overall midsize SUV market. And it's phenomenal how, despite the deluge of competition, the brand continues to hold on to its own and continues to raise the bar.
Clearly the most important model for Hyundai. In fact, there's a bit of a joke that it's not just Hyundai Motor India, it's Creta Motor India, because this model is so critical to Hyundai. And as you said, it's contributing a huge amount of revenue. So clearly a model that, Hyundai will always throw whatever it can at it. And we've seen the kind of options we have, the variants, the choice of powertrains, everything. It's just phenomenal.
It's phenomenal how they throw everything in, and I'd like you to reflect on the past and how this segment, which used to be a few 100,000 units, has now today turned on to a massive part of the overall market. Why don't you give us a recap on how this entire midsize SUV segment came about and what were the serious alternatives and how this brand actually transformed the SUV market in the country?
Well, it's actually quite a new segment if you look back. If you take the history of the auto industry, and it's just, you have to go back just about, I think, maybe even a little more than a decade to when it all started.
True.
I think it started with the XUV 500. Why I would say it started with that is that was the first real monocoque, locally produced, Indian produced vehicle. Until then, all you had were Scorpios and Safaris, which were serving as personal SUVs, let's say premium SUVs or whatever. Clearly body on frame, not as comfortable as a monocoque, though body on frame again has a different appeal right now, which we've seen with the Rocks. And if you see, the XUV 500 was also a rage when it came out in 2011. Fantastic pricing, and just the same Mahindra strategy then, super pricing with all the bells and whistles, the touch screen, all that was there. But again, a very raw product. That was Mahindra's first monocoque. So there are a lot of issues. I think basically the torsional stiffness wasn't there. You could feel it when you drive. A lot of torque steer. We talked about this in earlier podcasts, on to get the, good ground clearance, a compromise on the droop angles of the half shaft, all that sort of thing. So dynamically, not a great car. It was big. I think the car that really kind of gave birth to the mid-size SUV segment was the Renault Duster.
Oh, yes.
And I think that was, it was our 2013 car of the year. It was launched in 2012. And I think rightly so, because it really transformed that segment altogether. And I think what the Renault Duster did, unlike the XUV 500, which is a big car, 3 rows, lot of space, this was a 5-seater, which drove brilliantly. It had a fantastic diesel engine, the K9K diesel at that time. And, it kind of set the template for what a mid-size SUV should be. About 4.3 meters long, not too big, not too small. That's really the sweet spot. And I think that's becoming more and more important now today, why the Creta and mid-size SUVs are gaining strength, because in today's environment, more traffic, congestion, parking problems, parking at home where, parking lots are much smaller. You need that sweet spot, that right size, which is about 4.3, 4.4 meters, not more than that. I mean, you do have a market for that, but this is the right spot. So you had the Duster coming in 2012 with that K9K engine, and clearly it was a bit crude, a bit built to a cost,
Right.
because it's based on the M0 Logan platform. And you say the flap type door handles, which are really cheap, something you get on an Alto. But it drove brilliantly. That diesel engine was fantastic, and the ride was brilliant. It just was a car that everyone was waiting for. And then came the Creta in 2015. And so while the Duster kind of, in a way, kind of conceived or gave birth to the mid-size segment as we know it now, the Creta went on to dominate it completely, as it has done for almost a decade. And I think, again, Ketan, as we know, it was a combination of, again, ticking all the right boxes.
Yes.
I feel that size, that optimum size, as I say, not too big, not too small, is really what plays in its favor. Pretty spacious, a good 5-seater, and with all the options, multiple engine, diesel, petrol. And I think at that point, it kind of just took off. And at that point, Renault itself wasn't doing that great, and they didn't invest in the Duster.
Kind of gave away the space to
gave away the space to the competition. And then finally, when they got out of diesel in 2020 for a reason that they felt diesel was not the way to go because of Dieselgate, the most stupid decision that Renault made, they effectively killed the Duster. Because with the petrol, it just didn't have the same appeal. So I think really the Creta, it set the template for what a mid-size SUV has done. And since then, everyone has tried to copy it. And, everyone says, even we write a Creta Fighter, the Creta Rival, the Creta Segment. Absolutely. I mean, the Creta, in a way, defines it. And when you think of mid-size SUV, you think of the Creta.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Whenever I talk to market experts, and the sense I get, the mainstreaming of SUVs actually started with Creta. Yes, we had the EcoSport in the sub 4 meter.
Yeah, that was sub 4 meter.
Sub 4 meter avatar. We had the Duster, as you mentioned. But again, it was from fringe brands with limited presence, with Hyundai.
And limited investment. I don't think Renault had the wherewithal to invest at that time. Hyundai was making money, so they could pump in a lot into their product, which Renault sadly never did.
No, absolutely. And what is phenomenal about Hyundai is that, like you said, whenever they come in with their best.
All guns blazing.
All guns blazing. It's always, with regards to India, I've seen over the years that they come from a place of offense. Indian operation for long has been the third biggest manufacturing facility for them in the world. It accounts for 20% of global volume. So clearly a lot is at stake in India. They make good money out of India. And I still remember when it was launched, I mean, again, they kind of introduced the segment first features that we had never seen in the segment. Yeah. And with every possible interventions that they did, they continued to raise the bar with every possible launches or facelifts that we saw with time.
Right. And I think, as you said, I think, you've had a lot of competition for them. You've had, I think the one which probably could have been a big threat was the Seltos.
Right.
And that's what I think we should talk about. Why the Seltos, which had similar aggregates and similar mechanicals, and actually was a very well-made car. I think when it came out in 2019, don't forget the old generation Creta was still in the market. And the Seltos just, I think, blew everyone away.
Absolutely.
I mean,
it was phenomenal to start with.
Again, it was our car of the year, at that time. But I think, the Seltos has always been under the shadow of the Creta. So I think when the Seltos was launched, there were a few games being played. And one of them was on diesel, because don't forget, within the group, Kia was making the petrol engines. for the group, and Hyundai was making the diesel engines. And I think there was some Hyundai obviously didn't give them enough supply of diesel. This was what Kia has been grumbling about. And so I think at that time, diesel was a substantial, let's say, percentage of total sales.
Right.
And I mean, today it's still about 39% for Creta.
Absolutely.
It's the flip for, I mean, it's much less for Seltos. Seltos has an even smaller percentage of diesel because historically Hyundai has kind of starved the Kia of giving them, the supply of diesel that they wanted. So I think Seltos, again, one would have imagined, could have put up a stronger fight, but they didn't have the reach, it didn't have the penetration, especially in tier 3 and tier 4 towns. And I think then when the new next gen Creta came, which was in 2020, I think everything that the Seltos had and a bit more, like a panoramic sunroof, the Creta had. So I think again the shoe was on the other foot, whereas for a couple of months the Seltos definitely far superior than the old gen or the first gen Creta, and then it came back. And I think the Creta is something like, I think in India, when success only breeds success. We've seen that cars like the Innova, people just keep buying the next generation. They become the safest buy. We've seen that to some extent with the City, we've seen with the Ertiga, and with the Creta, it's one of those default purchases. You can't really go wrong. As I said, it ticks all the boxes. It's superbly equipped, a really good size, and I think compared to the other mid-size SUVs, it's really got, in terms of size, it's really the best. You compare it with the Taigun or the Kushaq, which are much smaller, especially at the rear. You compare it even with the Hyrider, where you get the hybrid, but you don't get the boot space.
Right.
So, there's it really has been a car that has really consistently stood out in terms of what it offers. And I think clearly we can see that in the sales itself.
No, absolutely. It's a complete package, isn't it, Hormazd? And one thing that, while reporting about the company, you get to hear very frequently about how well they know the market and as to how much they have their ears to the ground, how much of time that they spend on ground zero researching the market, forecasting the market. And if you were to really see, some of the best-in-class features are first seen on Hyundai cars.
Yeah.
And then we see the rest of the market really actually adopting.
Yeah, though I must say now Mahindra is taking that mantle. We've seen what they've done with their their electrics, with that, the Ethernet based, let's say ENE, they can just take it to another level. But we've talked about that earlier.
And, Hormazd, talking about raising the bar, I mean, way back in 2015, with the first generation Creta, they had the side and curtain airbags, 17-inch diamond cut alloy wheels for those times. That was fantastic. Infotainment with navigation, smart key with push button start. All these were features that the segment had not seen. So they were really wanting to offer something to the market that market had not seen. They always think several years ahead. And with every possible iteration, with say 2018, the facelift version the iteration that we saw, there was electric sunroof, there was power driver seat, wireless charger. 2020, they added panoramic sunroof, paddle shifters. Then we started seeing health purifier because of the pollution challenge. And in 2024, we had the dual zone climate control, ADAS features, 10-inch screen. So they've constantly raised the bar when it comes to the value proposition for the buyer.
And more than that, Ketan, they do a good job of it. I think for me, the way the UI UX is today of the Hyundai cars, I always take the Ioniq 5 as the best example. But, even in, let's say, the Tucson, the Creta, it's all very logically laid out, a good mix of, let's say, a screen interface and buttons. I think they've really cracked that and done that well. I mean, again, I'm comparing it what we've seen with the Mahindra, the B6, which you just driven. I mean, a lot of equipment, but to be honest, very haphazardly done. And the Hyundais are much more logical in that way. So I think you're absolutely right here. They not only give features, but they give features that really work well.
Yeah, sunroof is one feature. I mean, that is one thing that they introduced, and it has taken the market by storm.
I remember, I think that was the kind of, let's say, one of the things over the Seltos, because Seltos came quite a range, but then when the next gen Creta came after that, it had the pano roof, which made a lot of difference.
Right.
But I think it's more than just the features, and what I want to come back is, it is the powertrain options which Hyundai
Variety.
offers on the Creta, the variety. Just look at the spread of powertrain, which is engine and gearbox options that they offer. They've got everything. And if you look at the split, you can clearly see that where the others are losing out. For example, we've spoken about it, almost 40% is still diesel. Both big players like Volkswagen, Skoda, Maruti, Toyota don't offer diesel at all. So, they've got that whole market over there. Of course, they've got, Kia with the Seltos. But as I said earlier, Hyundai is the one that is in control of diesel production. In fact, all diesel engines in the Hyundai Kia, group, or the Hyundai Motor Group for both brands, Hyundai is entrusted with manufacturing diesel and Kia with petrol.
Right.
So it's where Hyundai really controls diesel production, and obviously, allocation in a sense is controlled by them. And I've said earlier also, it's not something Kia is happy with, but sibling rivalry, especially amongst the Koreans, is very fierce. So obviously they're going to do whatever they can.
The other side of synergies, as they say.
Yeah, that's right. So, but what's interesting is when you see which of the engines are really doing well. And I think 41% of all Creta sales is the humble 1.5 naturally aspirated engine with a manual gearbox.
Fantastic.
And everyone can wonder why it's quite a, let's say, I wouldn't say a mundane engine, but not a very exciting engine. But at the end of the day, people want something that's fairly fuel efficient, easy to drive. And the 1.5 CVT is 16%. So clearly, automatics also gaining a lot over there. But that engine, we ran that car as a long-termer. And the 1.5 NA with the CVT is a fantastic combination. Super easy to drive. It's quite okay on the highway. And that CVT doesn't feel like a CVT. In fact, it's one of the best CVTs in the market. And very little rubber band effect. Conversely, their turbo petrols, not very impressed with. Let's say the way Volkswagen does their TSI engines, far superior to what Hyundai Kia do. And even their DCT, it's okay. It's not really the best. And, DCT is something which really doesn't work too well in the Indian market, especially in this segment. Whereas Volkswagen, Skoda, they only have turbo petrols. They have an 80 for the 1 liter and a DC3 at the top. So really, they are vacant in a lot of the space of the mid-size segment. It's the same with Maruti and Toyota. They also just don't have the powertrain options over there.
Beyond hybrid, they don't have anything else.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So Ketan, the powertrain is something that Hyundai has really cracked, and even on the automatic side, which I spoke about. Just to give some context. The CVT was 12% last year, 23. It's jumped to 16% this year. So the 4% jump. So clearly, CVT as an option is working really well.
Right.
And, not many offer a CVT as an automatic transmission option. So they've really got, with their powertrain mix, that really is one of the key successes of the Creta.
What about Indian brands, Tata Motors and Mahindra? In fact, they really had to dig deep to find an alternative to that, and we still don't have an alternative for
that. That's right. It's interesting that both these brands don't have that absolute head-on Creta fight. And it's very interesting why they don't have it is because their platforms really don't allow them to develop one. And whilst it's on the platform, because there's one very important dimension in any car. And it's very important because to change that, you have to literally change the entire car. It's like, having to, let's say you're building a building and then you want to pull out one pillar at the end,
Can't do that.
You can't do that. So it's called the L113 dimension, which is an SAE term. And that dimension is from the front of the front axle line to the heel of the foot. That gap is super important because it dictates the size of your wheel arch, the interior space, the whole packaging, safety, all that. And so clearly with that dimension, it's allowed Hyundai to have large wheels,
better space,
and better space, longer wheelbase, which the others haven't managed to. Now, let's say you take
That's
the
an
Curve,
interesting one,
which
yeah.
can get the same wheel size, but it's got a smaller wheelbase. It doesn't have as spacious a cabin as the Creta has. And clearly the Curve we've seen is more like an X1 Plus than anything. Though I think the Sierra, I'm very excited about that. That could genuinely be a Creta rival, the way it's turning out, with its proper SUV look. And Mahindra themselves also haven't been able to manage a Creta rival with what they could have was with the Tivoli platform. Now, the Tivoli platform on which the XUV 300 and now the 3XO was based actually was in its original avatar as the SsangYong Tivoli, a Creta fighter, because, they didn't have to cut it. It was 4.3 meters long, and that could have worked. But the problem was that platform was just too expensive. It was made for Europe. It was heavy, and it just wasn't cost competitive enough. So really, I think Mahindra has kind of, scaled down that platform, use it for their sub 4 meter, but really to use it as let's
a proper 4.3 meter.
A proper 4.3 meter, they haven't managed to do that. So both these companies, very elusive, and they've not been able to do it on their own.
And they've looked at partnerships as well, isn't it, Hormazd?
Absolutely, they've looked at partnership. I think one product that would have come out of the Mahindra Ford partnership, if it had gone through, was a Creta fighter, which Ford was developing.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, but now with Ford gone, that product...
Unfortunately, we're not going to see that.
And I think not a lot of people don't know that Tata Motors was so desperate for a Creta fighter, and probably they still are. And I think they're trying to make it work now with the Sierra, which they've gone in that direction. They had looked at two Chinese partners.
Right.
One was Chery, which they were looking at the Tiggo 4 as a rebadged Tiggo 4 with a Tata badge. Can you imagine a Chinese product which would have been head-on with the Creta? And they had also been talking to Geely, which we know about, but both those fell through.
I remember the Autocar Scoop Blackbird. I think the project was Blackbird.
That's right. It was Project Blackbird, and Blackbird has been an elusive bird, so it's not been done. So really, this is a super important segment, as we've seen Creta going from strength to strength. And, obviously, it's a very well-defined product. It's a product that's been well-honed over 10 years. It's a product that has got a lot of fan following. Even the resale value is good. And frankly, it's not got as much competition as, let's say, products in the compact SUV segment.
Right.
That you've got just so much competition.
Right.
Here you don't have two biggies,
right,
like Mahindra and Tata, as yet giving a head-on Creta fighter.
Absolutely. And what I feel, Hormazd, from operational standpoint, it is such a sweet spot that they can really make good money. If you were to really look at the era before Creta, Hyundai was really known as a compact car player. If there was one car, we did see the fluidic Verna attempting to kind of graduate to the next level, but they were always a second alternative to Honda. It was only after Creta that one could see that Hyundai has actually now graduated to the next segment. And look at the average price points now. Before Creta, the average price points of Hyundai was somewhere around 6 to 7 lakh. Today, the average price point of Hyundai has gone up to almost 12 to 13, or maybe more. So clearly, Hyundai has made that progress. And beyond that, you started seeing huge amount of profits being made. Just last year, they made profits of 6,000 crores. And even
an absolute cash cow.
Phenomenal as to how, even before the IPO, through royalty and dividend, Hyundai Motor India sent back some 30-odd thousand crore back to the parent. So it just shows that, right segment, right time, right price, and it's just a sweet spot for the company.
Absolutely. And I think, going forward, I think this is one, segment they're going to consolidate. And I think... next year, we've got the Creta EV, which will expand the Creta brand even further, the way Tata has very effectively done with the Punch. A Punch, a large proportion of their sales are EV as well.
No, absolutely. But here I feel, I don't know, I'd like to get your views as well, Hormazd. I've seen Hyundai behaving differently as a leader when it gets into a segment and makes segment its own. But it behaves very differently when it is a challenger. We all know that, the electrification and penetration is still at a very early stage of adoption at 2%. We still early days. But do you think with so much of buzz about Mahindra EVs and Tata EVs, what do you expect from Hyundai in terms of EV?
Well, I don't think they're going to run away with the market. That's my feel. I think the Creta EV will be bought by a lot of Creta loyalists who just want an electrified version of the Creta. Whereas, let's say what we've seen with the Mahindra B6 until they sort out their issues with Indigo, that wow factor is just, been dazzling. And I don't think the Creta EV will have that wow factor. It's going to be appealing to a different kind of person. And I think, you know, Ketan, we shouldn't underestimate what the Creta brand is, because a lot of people felt, and even Mahindra tried to say, that their Rox was an alternative to the Creta. But when competition comes, somehow the Creta doesn't get affected, isn't it? I mean,
it's just phenomenal.
Look at the runaway success of the Rox, but Creta not affected.
No, phenomenal.
So people who want to buy a Creta will just go and buy the Creta, and there's a huge base of that. You've got now, you know, as you said, 1 million Creta owners. So that only proliferates more buyers. We've seen this with successful brands, Innova being one. Every time a new model comes, you've got a huge base of the existing ones just automatically and blindly upgrading. So I think that's what is happening in the case of the Creta. It's got this total kind of, I wouldn't say herd mentality, but it's just become a default setting for anyone wanting, let's say an SUV. And, the Rox, yes, and we've said this before, there's no way a Rox is as user-friendly as a Creta. I mean, a Rox is a very emotional purchase. It does things the Creta can't do, especially appealing to the heartstrings. It can go places where the Creta can't go. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to practicality. Somewhere deep down there, given, the current environment, the current work pressures, the world we are living in, everyone wants something that is just no nonsense, simple, and just gets you from point A to point B with little fuss. That's why, the 1.5 NA CVT and manual, them doing so well is really an eye-opener as to what finally people are going.
And add to that an EV, you have a complete range and a package. And we saw what happened to Tata Motors sales when they started offering different powertrains at different price points.
Nexon Punch also, yeah.
Nexon Punch. I mean, it just completely expanded the family. And then, at this point in time, when a category starts getting defined by a brand, we know that the brand has really reached the iconic proportion. And now the mid-size segment, like you said, the majority of the market keeps talking about a Creta rival, so to say. I mean, we know of Volvo buses, we know of automatic scooter as Activa. So clearly, I mean, it's going from strength to strength. This year, again, highest ever year at 1.9 lakh approximately. Now, phenomenal year from, I believe when Creta was launched, the mid-size market was somewhere around 2.5 to 3 lakh units. This year, it is likely to end at around 7 lakh. The category has more than doubled. The utility vehicle market, I mean, like you mentioned, it's the SUV is sort of a last decade phenomenon. It was about 25% of the market. The utility vehicle market is going to be 70% of the market in 2024. And one can say that Creta has played a big role in mainstreaming the SUV, so to say.
Absolutely. It has. As you said, phenomenal success. But in terms of exports, not too great, which again, in a way, proves my theory that cars that are super successful in India somehow don't cut it abroad. So I think exports hasn't been as great as we would have imagined.
Yes, right, Hormazd. I think with generation, it has changed. In the previous generation, when the model was called GS internally, Hyundai used to do about 40-odd thousand per annum. So the scale was really helping them. But with the new generation SU2 in the current avatar as we see it, the export numbers have started coming down. Now, come to think of it, whether it is the other alternatives in the market, whether it's the competition or whether it's overt focus on the domestic market, but clearly the export has become rather limited with time. And if you were to really look at the focus market, they've looked at Latin America, Asia and Africa. Again, these are still small emerging markets, not really large volumes, so to say, and hence they've not really gone to the evolved markets. So it's emerging market specific model, largely focused on India and very rather limited export potential.
Well, Ketan, I'll be quite honest, and not many people might like this, but the Creta, however successful it is, it just doesn't stand a chance in markets like Europe, the US or wherever, because it is not of that global standard. And to understand that, we had a long-term Tucson and we had the Creta, and I had both side by side, and small details. You look at something like the piano black finishes on the Creta, good but slightly wavy.
Right.
You look at it on the Tucson, it's just of a different level. You look at the little details like, the cabin lighting, that sort of thing. It's just different on the backlighting of certain things like USB ports, all that sort of thing, which is done so well in the Tucson. The way the lighting is done in the door bins. You can see where Hyundai has kind of saved on costs, obviously giving it back in a lot of other features which Indian customers love. So they've realized that, Indian customers love a lot of the infotainment features. ADAS has become more important, it's giving ADAS right now. But the smaller details that's where they are stinting on, which might work, which, may be ignored in India, but that's very important internationally. Again, from a crash rating point of view, Creta hasn't really got any crash. The last crash rating it got was, a 3-star on an older protocol. The newer protocol is much stronger. Tucson, 5-star. Euro NCAP also 5-star. So clearly, you can see that the depth of, I wouldn't say engineering, but just the detail that goes into cars like the Tucson compared to the Creta is very, very different. Of course, Tucson is in a different segment, but it's just to understand when you drive it, you can say this is a global model.
Right.
When you drive a Creta, to be honest, it doesn't feel like a global model. It feels like a great, let's say, car for the Indian market, and that's where it does well. But, honestly, that's the strategy you have to go with, because at the end of the day, you give your customers what they want and don't give them what they don't want, which is in fact more important at times than,
It's important to say no to things.
Exactly, which is not valued over here. And Hyundai has done that really well. And, I think this is really a case study as to how to crack a certain segment and build not just a brand, but, take a whole company which is now gone public.
No, absolutely. And I mean, right product for an evolving needs of the market, from what was a compact car market that has traversed into a more of an upgraders market. And Creta itself has kind of traversed that journey through multiple iterations and more variants along the way and adding more features. But yes, traversed a distance probably for a global model. They need to do some more.
They need to do some more. But, just to end clearly, I think, with the facelift, again, it's taken the game forward. A lot of people thought the design would be polarizing. But, again, design is so subjective. It's more for people on social media to comment whether they like it or hate it. And there are a lot of haters out there which just want to say their bit. I remember there was so much hate for the Mahindra 3XO, and I knew, that means great, it's going to do well, which it does. So clearly, I think with each generation, Hyundai has really lifted the game of the Creta. In fact, even it won a category award. The best variant of the year, 2025, because really they had done a lot to it, literally had taken the game further up. And I think this is the most important model for Hyundai, and they are going to make sure that they don't let go of the hold it has on the Indian consumer and, let's say, on the minds, pockets and hearts of the car buyer.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the EV version now.
That's right. And I think the EV version is what we're all looking forward to. But really, the midsize SUV segment is where the action is. That is where the sweet spot is. That is where you get that lovely combination of great volumes and great margins. They are the cash cows for most auto companies, Hyundai being a classic example. So hope you've enjoyed watching this session of Deep Drive. Do tune in same time next week, Saturday, 11 o'clock. And you can also catch us on Apple Podcast and Spotify. Thanks for watching.